An alien probe? 3i Atlas is hurtling through our solar system, with jets stretching millions of kilometers across space. And NASA sitting on photographic evidence for more than 40 days. Is it a comet or a craft? Harvard astrophysicist Dr. Avi Loeb joins us to break down the mystery. If that sounds like science fiction, it's not. It's happening right now. Hey everyone, I'm Matt Ford, and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. We've got a very special guest tonight. He's the head of Harvard's Galileo Project, the founding director of the university's Black Hole Initiative, and one of the world's leading astrophysicists. He's also the best-selling author of Extraterrestrial and Interstellar. He's been at the center of global attention for his research into 3i Atlas, the mysterious interstellar object now passing through our solar system. Here's our interview with Dr. Avi Loeb. Dr. Loeb, welcome back to the Good Trouble Show. I think we interviewed you around, it was probably about 2 months ago, and of course a lot has happened since your first appearance. And I have to tell you, word on X is that you invented 3i Atlas to distract from the Epstein files, because you know if it's on the internet, it's got to be true, right?
Yeah, well, that was one of the conspiracy theories, and I had a simple way of battling it. I basically said, buy online a telescope tens of centimeters in size, and you'll see it in the sky. If I were able to plant a 3i Atlas, an object the size of a city, at a distance of several times the Earth-Sun separation, I would be more powerful than the Pope.
That would be pretty powerful. Although I would imagine President Trump would be perfectly fine if you invented this thing and no one talked about the Epstein files. But kidding aside, during your last appearance, I think you gave 3i Atlas something like a 30 to 40% chance of being a technical object. Walk us through some of the latest scientific findings since we last saw you 2 months ago, and has your sort of estimate of this being a technical object, has that percentage changed at all?
Well, I'm waiting for the coming weeks because they're really critical. We would be able to get much better data. The object passed near the sun on October 29th, and will get closest to Earth on December 19th, just 6 days before Christmas. And the hope is it will not that it will not deliver any unwanted gifts for the holidays to Earth. But in terms of it being natural or technological, the verdict is still out, and I can describe how we will figure it out in the coming weeks. There is a very simple way. Basically, we in the latest images over recent days, we see jets, more than 7 of them, coming out of the object, and they're well collimated. And there could be 2 sources for those jets. Either there are pockets of ice that's sublimated by the illumination of sunlight, in which case the speed of the jets can be predicted based on the surface temperature of the object at its distance from the sun. And also the amount of mass flowing in the jets can be calculated because they are going out to a distance of 1 million kilometers in the direction of the sun, some of them. And they are going against the solar wind, whose parameters we know. So from that, we can calculate how much mass they carry. And that's in the case it's a natural object. However, if we're dealing with technological thrusters, we know that rockets use an exhaust speed that is at least 10 times bigger than the speed you get from the surface of a comet at that distance from the sun. And moreover, we have ion thrusters that can reach another factor of 10 in speed, up to tens of kilometers per second. And who knows what alien technology thrusters are capable of. So there is a very simple test, and that is to measure the speed of the jets that we observe around the 3i Atlas and the amount of mass flowing through them. And we can easily distinguish between the speed expected for a pocket of ice being sublimated by sunlight and the speed expected from a technological thruster. Also, the composition of the jets would be different in both cases. In the case of a natural comet, I calculated the object may have actually disintegrated. It may have broken up because we see much more surface area exposed to sunlight to generate the amount of mass flowing through the jets than one would expect from the original size of the object. So there are clean ways of figuring out the nature of the object. If it was broken up, we're able to peer into the body of the object because we see everything being evaporated. And we would clearly know that not only that it was natural, but also what composition it had in its core. And so that's in the coming weeks. But the reason I allowed for the technological option to be viable is because there are a number of anomalies of this object. First, its size is the size of a city, more than 5 kilometers in diameter. And that means the object is 1 million times more massive than the first interstellar object that we discovered. So why haven't we seen 1 million small ones before we see the third being a big one? There is a limited amount of material available, and if you package it, in different mass scales, you would expect many more small ones than big ones. The other interesting point is that there isn't enough rocky material in interstellar space to deliver such a giant rock into the inner solar system over the past decade. And you might ask, okay, well, maybe it was targeting the inner solar system, in which case there was some intelligence behind it. And indeed, we see the trajectory being aligned with the plane of the planets around the sun. The chance of that happening at random is 0.2%. The chance of getting a rock that big is 1 in 1,000. So altogether, we get a very small probability if you multiply both of them. Just these anomalies by themselves are already quite alarming. And then on top of that, there was nickel with very little iron detected around it. And the only other place we see that is in industrial production of nickel alloys. And there were these anti-jets that now we see clearly in the image. Those are flows of material towards the sun. And you would expect the sunlight and the solar wind to push against cometary material, and that's why we see cometary tails extended away from the sun. And there was also a very extreme polarization that is not understood. There are lots of anomalies, but the bottom line is we need to let the data guide us. And what I see is instead the comet experts insist that it must be a comet. And the way, I was asked by many people about it, and I say, well, they are just like AI systems. They are trained on a data set of comets. If you were to train AI systems just on data on comets, they would interpret any object in the sky as a comet. And that's what the experts are doing. Even if when Oumuamua, the first interstellar object, didn't show any cometary debris around it, no gas or dust, and it had some non-gravitational acceleration, they argued it's a dark comet where it is a comet, but you can't see the signatures of a comet. And I would say, well, a spacecraft would also be classified as a dark comet because you won't see the signatures. So anyway, I do believe we should remain curious about this object because, the joy of doing science is allowing different possibilities and deciding which one is real based on the collection of evidence. So science is built on the foundation of the humility to learn, not the arrogance of expertise.
On your Medium page, you posted, and by the way, I'm absolutely blown away by how much you are posting on your Medium page. And I think you hit 100,000 followers, I think,
Yes.
or subscribers? Well, congratulations. Yes. It is just a wealth of information. And in one of your recent articles called The Remarkable Large-Scale Structure of Tail from 3I Atlas, you posted, I'm going to put them up here, you posted 2 photos of 3I Atlas by Frank Niebling and Michael Buckner. So if you can see these, what are we looking at here?
Yeah, so what you're looking is at jets coming out of the object, and they extend in the direction of the sun towards the lower left corner, and opposite to the direction of the sun in the upper right corner. And the jet towards the sun goes out to about 1 million kilometers. The one in the opposite direction goes out to 3 million kilometers. So that's huge, and it sort of looks like smoke coming out of the object, but it's actually a well-collimated jet that is partly shaped by the solar wind that is blowing from the bottom left. And I calculated that these jets, in the case of a natural comet, they should carry a few billion tons of material, and therefore, the object may have even broken up to pieces because you need a large surface area to accommodate the mass flowing in them. So that's in case it's a natural comet, but it could be, some propulsion by thrusters on a spacecraft. We need to wait and see what happens in the coming weeks and observe it with much better telescopes. This was an amateur astronomer telescope that was looking at it, and that's when the object was relatively close to the sun in the sky. So today it's already 30 degrees away from the sun in the sky, and in the coming weeks hundreds of observatories around the globe would look at it, as well as the Hubble and the Webb telescopes in early December. So I think we will know a lot about these jets and figure out the nature of the object from them.
Have you seen anti-tails before on comets? And I take it what you mean by anti-tail is it's 180 degrees opposite of the tail?
Yeah, it's directed in the sunward direction. So it's towards the sun, and usually these do not exist because the sun, the radiation pressure from the sun and the solar wind are pushing dust and gas particles away from the sun. That's why you have these beautiful cometary tails. There are circumstances where you have some illusion, optical illusion, when the Earth is oriented, at some angle relative to the tail, and it looks as if it's pointing towards the sun, but it's not really. And these are fake anti-tails. They're not real. And I'm not aware, actually, of a real anti-tail at the level that we're seeing from 3I Atlas, where, this anti-tail goes 100 million kilometers towards the sun. And the one that goes in the opposite direction is only 3 times farther. It could be stretched by the solar wind, pulling it along.
So the length of this thing is very anomalous.
Yeah, the length and also the geometry, because it looks like a well-collimated set of jets. And there is a high-resolution image that was released a day earlier that has more than 7 jets seen. These are early images, and I expect the biggest telescopes on Earth to give us much better, much higher resolution images. There is also a high-resolution image of this object when it came close to Mars, 29 million kilometers from Mars, taken by the HiRISE camera on board the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. And that was taken on October 2nd and 3rd. It has 30 kilometers per pixel resolution, better by a factor of 3 compared to the Hubble image that was obtained on July 21st. And unfortunately, October 2nd was a day after the government shutdown was initiated. And the claim from NASA is, due to the government shutdown, they're unable to share the data. It's already 40 days. And I asked the NASA team that operates HiRISE. Many of them are situated at the University of Arizona. They're not NASA employees. So I asked them to share the data, with scientists. They don't need to make a press release, but they declined to do that. And I communicated with Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who sent a formal letter to the interim, the acting administrator of NASA, Sean Duffy, asking for these images to be released. And then she was told that it's just a bureaucratic reason for this data to be withheld. And in fact, the HiRISE camera does release images, but it's not allowed to release anything about 3I Atlas, which is really strange. Why was 3I Atlas singled out? But the claim is that they need to get approval from NASA headquarters, and because of the shutdown, they're unable to share the data. And I think it's really unfortunate that bureaucracy stands in the way of progress in science, because all that they needed to do is for the scientists to deposit the data in a publicly available repository where other scientists could get to it. That doesn't require much work. It's not in violation of any law, and it's just the standard way of sharing data among scientists. But they're not doing that, and for 40 days we haven't seen that data, and it's time sensitive because our understanding of 3 Atlas depends on what we already know, and that's how we plan the future observations. And the one advantage of this set of images maybe that the HiRISE camera took is that they are viewing 3 Atlas from the side. When the Hubble telescope looked at it, it was approaching the Earth and the Sun. It was very far away, and the Earth direction was only misaligned by 10 degrees from the direction of the Sun, so we were looking at it edge on. But when the HiRISE camera looked at it, it was passing near Mars, and it looked at it sideways, and that's a very different perspective. So I very much hope that now that the shutdown is about to be over, that we will get access to this data.
Well, I wonder, Dr. Loeb, if this imagery was initially classified top secret, and and then it had to go through a whole declassification process. Because I have to wonder. I mean, obviously, if this object turns out to be a technological object, I mean, this thing would truly be a black swan event in every, in every meaning of that. So I wonder if NASA does have clear evidence that this thing is technological and they're going through a declassification process. Could you see them hiding it or altering the imagery so as not to cause panic? Let's say this thing does look like a UAP or whatever. Do you think that's even a possibility?
No, I think it makes little sense. I mean, in the days of Galileo Galilei, he was the only one to adapt a telescope to look at the moons of Jupiter, and the Vatican could have put him in house arrest and suppressed that information. Nowadays, there were already 227 telescopes around the globe that looked at 3I Atlas. You can't really suppress information. And moreover, we'll know much more about it in the coming weeks. So it's not as if the government can be very effective at keeping it, whatever it is, secret. It sounds to me more like bureaucracy taking over and sabotaging good science. And that, I think, is inappropriate because NASA would have gotten good publicity out of that if it was timely. And now, if they will release it, 45 days after the data was taken, it might not be the biggest news because we have much better data now that it comes closer to Earth. So I do think it's unfortunate in terms of the way science is being managed. We should never let bureaucrats control the scene. We should give a higher priority to the science than to bureaucracy. And we all know that very often it's the other way around because the bureaucrats, they can only increase in number, and then they support each other. They keep asking for more forms from the scientists. I see that in universities nowadays there are, many more administrators at Harvard University where I am, and I really have nostalgia to those days where I could go to the highest level of the administration and speak directly with the people up there. But now there are all these intermediate layers of bureaucrats, and bureaucracy always grows in size, and that's very unfortunate because it's like fat that is using up resources, and then what the body is losing its purpose because when we explore science, we want a lean institution that is constructed to basically help the scientists accomplish their goals rather than rule the scientists the way bureaucracies do. And in addition to that, we should focus on allocating most resources to research and education. So I'm really finding the situation right now, both at large organizations like NASA or universities, as well as unfortunately too bureaucratic. And it would have been nice if we were to go back and give the priority to the science.
I agree with that. I mean, we definitely need to lose a bureaucracy, the fat, probably about as much as I need to lose about 15 pounds of eating way too much Halloween candy. But back to the NASA thing. So the high-rise imagery, do you expect that to be of significantly better resolution and more informative than what we have seen from the two images that we just showed? And then I understand as well, China has released imagery of the comet, or not the comet, or whatever we want to call it, 3I Atlas.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what to expect. So China indeed released, they used the camera that is only 38 centimeters in diameter. The high-rise camera is 50 centimeters in diameter. And the Chinese images were relatively fuzzy. They didn't reveal much about, the nature of the object. So I hope that the high-rise images are more informative, but I cannot be sure until I see them. And, it's possible that it will not add much information. But on the other hand, maybe it will, and maybe there is something to be learned. And I'm waiting to get access to the actual data so that we can analyze it with my colleague, where we modeled the evaporation from the surface of 3I Atlas, and we can constrain our model much better. This was a model that we constructed for why there is an anti-tail, and it's very puzzling. And the strange thing is that many commentators are saying it's definitely a comet, but they don't explain the anomalies. And they say, well, comets are weird, they're strange. And yeah, well, that's not the way science is done. If there are anomalies and you can't explain them, then you should admit that your interpretation of the object might be wrong. And at the very least, even if it's a natural object, it might have been produced by some factories that we are not aware of, not similar to the solar system as we imagine.
Now, Dr. Loeb, you mentioned in an article, again, on your wonderful Medium page, that there is a radio signal that you mentioned about 3I Atlas that was around 1.665 gigahertz. And that is actually really close to the same frequency that researchers at Skinwalker Ranch say they detect. They detect spikes in this frequency range whenever UAP activity is reported above the ranch. I'm a huge fan of that show, and but I'm curious, do you think that there could be any connection, or is that just a coincidence because of how common that frequency is in space? Or is it common in space? Am I wrong about that?
Well, it's a radio frequency that is of interest, because I noticed that the WOW signal from 1977, that was an extraterrestrial signal that was never understood. It came from some mysterious source, and that was at a frequency of 1.4 gigahertz, and it was from a source potentially approaching the sun. And I realized that the direction where it came from was within 9 degrees from the arrival direction of 3I Atlas. And the question is, was it related? And I encouraged radio observers to check if there's any radio transmission from 3I Atlas. And, obviously we don't expect it from a rock. And indeed, this latest report found at 1.6 gigahertz some absorption spectral lines from hydroxyl radicals, molecules that have oxygen and hydrogen in them. That's the report. The report is about the molecules that we might expect to see even in natural comets. But that implies that indeed these observers are watching, are taking data on 3I Atlas in the radio, and if they see any transmission that cannot be naturally explained by molecules associated with a comet, then it would be of great interest. So let's just wait and see what they tell us. And there is also a radio antenna, a dipole antenna, on the Juno spacecraft orbiting Jupiter. And 3I Atlas will get close to Jupiter on March 16, 2026. And I was told by the principal investigator of Juno that they will try to detect any radio signatures coming from 3I Atlas.
Interesting. So this, theoretically, this 1.6 gigahertz frequency could be some kind of interstellar sort of transmission highway.
Well, what they were focusing on are spectral lines of OH molecules. And these are well known, and there is nothing, I mean, they appeared at the velocity of 3A Atlas. So, I mean, we knew that there is carbon dioxide, there is carbon monoxide, that there is cyanide shed by the object. There was nickel, there was iron. So there were all kinds of molecules and atoms detected around it. And this just adds another one, OH molecules. But it means they were looking around that frequency. They haven't reported if they detected any transmission from 3A Atlas or anything bizarre. And I would really like to see the data, because astronomers are usually driven to signals that they can easily interpret, that do not look alarming. And maybe there is something really strange about what they detected if they were to share the data with us, but they haven't published it yet.
Hey folks, over half of you watching right now are not subscribers. So please help us grow our show by becoming a subscriber to our channel and hit the little notification bell so you will always be up to date on our latest shows. We are also on all the major social media platforms. You can find us on X at Good Trouble Show and everywhere else at The Good Trouble Show. You can also find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Search for The Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford. And if you would like to become a supporter of The Good Trouble Show, please join us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. Your support allows us to keep bringing you great shows like today's with Dr. Avi Loeb. With that out of the way, let's get back to our interview with Dr. Loeb. I understand that there is a new, quote, nearly interstellar object called C2025V1, and it may be related to 3I Atlas. Tell us a bit about that. Like, could it be a probe from 3I Atlas? Like, what is this thing?
Yeah, that's very interesting, because this object is almost unbound to the sun. It's marginally bound to the sun. And potentially it arrived from very far away in the solar system, the Oort cloud, where a lot of comets are originated from. This object is moving in an orbit, an orbital plane that is almost perpendicular to that of 3I Atlas. So if it were up to gravity alone, the two objects would never come closer than about 70 million kilometers or so. They're unrelated. But on the other hand, if 3I Atlas released, if it's a mothership that released some technological probe that has the ability to maneuver, we don't know. Maybe this object came from 3I Atlas because it was on a different orbit and then it changed trajectory. All we can say is that if gravity sculpted the trajectory of the new object, it's unrelated to 3I Atlas.
Now, I want to talk a bit about the skeptics that you encounter and really kind of the personal attacks that you endure, which just absolutely blows me away. One of the things I said to you when you were on our show 2 months ago was how much I admired your childhood-like curiosity about this and your openness to being wrong, you know, that this could be something else, but the fact that you were open to data that represents sort of outliers, and those outliers pique your sort of curiosity. These attacks that you receive, how does it affect you personally? Are you able to let it roll off of you? And other than, let's say, just it being pure jealousy from the scientific community, do you suspect that there is another reason for the amount of flack that you get?
Well, it's clear that people that operate in echo chambers, where they think they know the answers to everything around them, they know that all objects in the sky must be most likely asteroids or comets, they will resist out-of-the-box ideas that may prove to be different, because that threatens their knowledge base, they threatens their expertise, and so they resist that. And we've seen that many times in the history of science. And you know, as much as I was frustrated early on in my career, I don't care much about it right now, because I don't care how many likes I have on social media. I don't have any presence on social media. But moreover, you know, I don't want to get into mud wrestling because that will get me dirty. So I just focus on the ball, as they say in basketball. Keep your eyes on the ball and just try to follow the evidence and interpret it, because that's ultimately what would count. And it's not what people say. And as to why they're doing it, that's something for them to discuss with their therapist. But I do think that it has a lot of psychological components to it that
Sure.
involving jealousy for the public attention. I'm getting a huge amount of interest from the general public. And by the way, that's not trivial by itself, because first, getting the public excited about science is not so easy. Even if the collider at CERN were to discover a new particle, I'm not sure that daughters will tell their mother that they want to become scientists, the way that I just learned from an email this morning from a mother that said that her daughter now wants to be a scientist. And
Awesome.
I also heard from a former US Air Force pilot that his daughter said that because of Avi, I want now to become a scientist. So I have a lot of these stories, and they give me a reason to pursue my curiosity, because it appears to inspire the public. The public doesn't like to feel as if the scientists are, at a press conference telling the public what they need to know from a vantage point of intellectual superiority, because that gives the impression that science is an occupation of the elite. And the scientists were wrong many times when they lectured the public about things. So it's not the right approach. Science is work in progress. It's a learning experience. And it's the foundation of science is the humility to learn, and not the arrogance of expertise. And that is something that I'm trying to convey by showing that the scientific process is like a detective story. We have clues. We are trying to figure it out. We shouldn't jump into conclusions prematurely. And it's ultimately up to the data to guide us as to the truth. And people love it because they see themselves as engaged in part of the process, and they're trying to figure things out, and it inspires them. And that puts science in a better light, actually. And at the same time, I see many of these zealots that are attacking me, arguing that it's anti-science. Well, what they're doing is anti-science, because I'm just in the trenches writing scientific papers and following the data and allowing myself to be more imaginative than just things that we have seen in the past. This is an object that is new to our neighborhood from outside. It's very unusual. So we will learn something new no matter what, even if it's natural. But we should allow the possibility of a technological object, because we launched 5 probes out of the solar system. So it's very arrogant for us to assume that Elon Musk was the most accomplished space entrepreneur since the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. Since there are 100 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy, most of them formed billions of years before the sun, and it takes less than 1 billion years, even for our technology, the Voyager spacecraft, to cross the Milky Way galaxy from one side to the other side. So that means that they could have reached us if they predated us by a few billion years. They could have reached us by now, and we should just agnostically search whether all the interstellar objects entering the solar system are rocks, or maybe one of them is a tennis ball that was thrown by a neighbor.
The mud wrestling actually brings to mind Brandon Fugel, the owner of Skinwalker Ranch. He had this great saying. I'd never heard of it before, but it was something along the lines of, you never want to get in and wrestle with the pig in the mud, because the pig wants you to wrestle with him. And I think that does make a good bit of sense. And the other thing too, I brought up earlier this whole idea of a black swan event. We actually had an individual on our show a good while who is the #2 at Pacific Gas and Electric, handles all their sort of retirement investments, and he's a very, very well accomplished individual in that field. And one of the things he and his colleagues that are in the upper levels of finance have been looking at and are looking at, and you're not hearing about it in the mainstream media, unfortunately, is the risk of something like this, 3I Atlas, or the UAP issue being a black swan event, in that something that literally comes out of left field but has such catastrophic impact on the world economy, on world political stability, I cannot think of anything other, or maybe perhaps AI, but 3I Atlas, the UAP issue, all of these things represent a potential black swan event that would upend just about everything in our world. So it puzzles me why you would have your colleagues, scientists, out there who are just unwilling to look at this, because it'll be at our peril if we don't.
Yeah, there is a simple explanation to that, because most of the topics that they are engaged in, and I was engaged in, involve objects at large distances. Imagine a galaxy at the edge of the universe, billions of light years away. And in those circumstances, it makes sense to adopt the most likely explanation and ignore low probability events that you assign a small likelihood of being real. But if we are dealing with a potential threat to humanity, even if the probability is small, we must, as you just said, we must consider it seriously, because you multiply a small probability by the huge impact that it would have, and there is no doubt that we need to consider it. And it's well known within the intelligence agencies, within governments, that low probability events are taken seriously. For example, consider terrorist attacks. Most of the time they don't happen, but nevertheless you collect as much data as possible to make sure that they don't happen, and verify that nothing, there is no threat. And so when having a visitor in our backyard, you have to verify that it's not technological, because it might enter through your front door. And so my argument is that we don't have the luxury that we have at dealing with esoteric scientific matters that have no influence on society. Here we have a situation where we must collect as much data as possible to figure out the nature of an interstellar visitor, even if we assign a small likelihood for it being technological. And this argument was pointed out a long time ago by Blaise Pascal, the philosopher mathematician, who said that you might say that God is not likely to exist, but the implications of the existence of God are so big that we must consider it and discuss it. And that was Pascal's wager. And all I'm saying is that nowadays the political system, the intelligence agencies, they are well aware of the need to discuss high-risk events, even if they have a small likelihood of being realized. And we should apply it to all interstellar objects. And my proposal is to establish an organization that would collect as much data as possible about any future interstellar object, involve scientists and policymakers that once we assign a likelihood for the object to be a threat, then we can decide how to respond to it. And I defined a new scale a few months ago called the Loeb scale, where 0 implies a natural object of no threat, and then 10 is definitely technological and could be a significant threat to humanity. And we should assign a rank on this scale to each and every incoming objects from interstellar space.
I think one of the most important things, and I cannot think of another scientist that stands for this more than you, is having this discussion. The fact that we are looking at the possibilities of what this thing may or may not be, but we're having this discussion, and we're having it in a public forum. And you have been in the news just right and left. You're on NBC recently. Having this discussion, to not have this discussion does a disservice to our democracy, and really to us as the human species. And I was messaging with a friend of mine by the name of Rob Heatherly, who has been doing all of this research on the sort of information warfare that has been taking place on Wikipedia. Now, I know Wikipedia is not reliable. A lot of people of course, know that. But Wikipedia is like the 7th or 5th most trafficked website in the world. People that maybe do not track a particular topic or not for in this instance, not scientifically maybe read up on a lot of stuff, they'll go to Wikipedia to look up what Dr. Avi Loeb is saying on this. And I don't know if you've heard of this group. There's a group called the Guerrilla Skeptics of Wikipedia. And it is this organization that has been around for a very long time. They essentially take any topic that they consider pseudoscience. So it could be chiropractic, it could be homeopathy, it could be a whole number of things. UAP certainly is in there. And how they control what is said on Wikipedia is they basically go and through kind of gaming the system, they are able to say who or what organization is considered a reliable source. So for instance, News Nation, they have listed as an unreliable / fringe source when it comes to the UAP issue. Anyway, I was messaging with Rob, and he noted, he goes, I'm not sure if you know this, but Dr. Avi Loeb has now been put up on the what is called the Reliability Sources Notice Board. And a member of this Guerrilla Skeptics is basically, this person wrote, as time passes, I become more and more confident that a RSN discussion regarding the reliability of anything Loeb writes or says will become necessary. Their, quote, prove me wrong approach to sensational data interpretation is becoming suspect. So here you have this organization that wields incredible power on Wikipedia, who, by the way, the founder of Wikipedia, Jimmy Wales, is well aware of what they are up to. But there is this effort to categorize you as not a reliable source. And the goal of them doing it is to shut this conversation down so that when someone goes onto Wikipedia and looks you up, they go, oh, this Dr. Avi Loeb guy, I don't think, it sounds like from Wikipedia, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, this is a travesty.
Well, the train has already left the station in terms of the public knowing what I say. Now, there are, reporters who twist my words just to get clickbait. And of course, that makes some people upset, and they refer to what the reporters say. But I argue, refer to primary sources. Read my essays, read my scientific papers, and you will get my point, also in podcasts as well. Now, of course, there would be a lot of people who are trying to silence this conversation, but science is better than politics. That's my point, that ultimately, if we collect data, we will figure it out. We will figure out the nature of interstellar objects, we'll figure out the nature of unidentified anomalous phenomena. That's what I'm leading in the context of the Galileo project. So when I'm pursuing the scientific method, really all these commentators, all these influencers on social media, on the web, on Wikipedia, they're not very relevant, because if we do find solid evidence that is beyond doubt, they will be wiped out by the evidence, you see. So it's all about doing the scientific work. Now, what they are trying to accomplish is that nobody would do the scientific work. Why? Because they will derail it by making statements that it's so far not reliable. And of course, that would make it not reliable in the future if people don't fund it, if people are discouraged of pursuing the scientific method. And I'm trying to just collect as much data as possible so that they will not be able to shove it under the carpet of traditional thinking and argue that it's speculative. This is the way science is done. And the interesting question is, why are some people so opposed to learning that we are not at the top of the food chain in the Milky Way galaxy? Why does it bother so many people? Of course, it goes against their ego to admit that there might be someone more intelligent than we are. We might have a sibling that is more accomplished. AI stands for artificial intelligence, but also for alien intelligence. And my point is, within the coming decade, we might find other entities that are cognitively more, superior to humans. So we would lose our hubris, which now prevails on social media, on the internet. So we will have AI systems that would supersede our abilities, cognitive abilities, and they will write the future history books, not those moderators, gatekeepers of Wikipedia. That's irrelevant. And humans obviously have a lot of faults, right? And so AI systems may bring some modesty to human existence because we would be at awe at how AI systems are performing so well, much better than our brain. But the same can happen in the context of alien intelligence if we discover it soon enough. And just yesterday, I established a bet with Michael Shermer, who
Oh,
is
wow.
the CEO of the Organization of Skeptics. And
Yes.
the bet is that within 5 years, we will find scientifically credible evidence for a technological artifact from an extraterrestrial civilization. That's my bet with him. And the bet money will go to the Galileo project, irrespective of how it ends, because both of us are members of the Galileo project. But my point is that when you ridicule the search for scientific evidence, what you're doing is maintaining our ignorance. You're saying this is not worth pursuing. And obviously, if you're not pursuing evidence, you will not find it. Now, if you look at the mainstream of science, you might say, oh, they are actually on track to find the evidence. Well, guess what? For 50 years, since I started practicing physics, there was a prevailing symmetry of nature that everyone believed exists. It's called supersymmetry. And the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, at the cost of $10 billion, was searching for it. They didn't find it. Okay, so that was a mainstream idea that people wrote thousands of scientific papers. They're still proud of those as the most accomplished papers of their career. But the idea was wrong. Okay, and then you have a whole community that dominates theoretical particle physics that works on extra dimensions in the context of string theory. No evidence whatsoever from experimental data that extra spatial dimensions exist, yet it's the mainstream, celebrated. Nobody criticizes it. Nobody would put on the Wikipedia page of a string theorist something negative about their career. And so my point is that, common sense is not common in academia.
And then you have people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who has not written a scientific paper in God knows how long, out there preaching to the choir.
It's not just him, it's also Brian Cox. These are commentators, the way I regard them. They don't write scientific papers on the subjects they're talking about. They're just trying to be popular by describing where the wind flows. And if the wind changes direction, imagine that I will find credible evidence for an extraterrestrial artifact. They will immediately say, yeah, of course, this was discussed long ago. It's not new. We sort of knew about it. They're always trying to go with the flow and be popular and,
Right.
and be liked by the scientific community, whatever it says. So if string theory prevails in theoretical particle physics, they will say only positive things about string theory, even though for 50 years there was no evidence whatsoever that there are extra dimensions, that this is a good direction to take. Just because it's popular within theoretical physics, they would praise it. Okay, and they are not critical at ideas that are completely speculative, much more so than the idea that we might have siblings in the Milky Way galaxy. Like, why is that speculative? We were made out, they would admit, we emerged on Earth as a result of a soup of chemicals that led to primitive life that eventually led to complex forms of life and to our intelligence. So they would agree with that idea. They would also agree that there are tens of billions of planets like the Earth, roughly at the same separation from a star like the Sun, in the Milky Way galaxy alone. And then they would say it's speculative to imagine something like us on those planets. And I say, no, that is actually far more reasonable and commonsensical to assume than extraspatial dimensions. And for some reason, this idea is being pushed back against. And my point about these commentators is that they are not, they are not writing scientific papers. They are just telling the public about what the scientific community thinks. And it's just like commentators in a soccer match. The players on the field are different from those that are on the bench in the sense that they can score a goal. You know, I'm actually writing scientific papers and I'm involved and entrenched in the scientific research that I'm talking about. And that's a very different viewpoint, and the public senses that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious who's doing the real work and who's not. Clearly, you're doing the real work. I have to ask you, Dr. Loeb, I don't know if anyone's ever asked you this. Have you ever seen a UFO?
No.
Go ahead.
But I'm very intrigued by reports that I hear, and that's why I'm leading the Galileo project that is trying to collect scientific quality data about such objects. And the latest observatory we established on top of the sphere in Las Vegas, we have 3 units there, and we are triangulating. In other words, we're looking at any object in the sky from 3 different directions, so we can figure out the distance, velocity, acceleration of anomalous objects. And my hope is we will be able to tell among the millions of objects that we will monitor in the coming year, whether any of them might be outside the performance envelope of human-made technologies. And once we find such a thing, you will know about it. It will not be classified.
I absolutely love that. And in addition to you being on top of the sphere in Las Vegas, I understand your face is actually on a race car now.
Yeah, because a day after I attended the Joe Rogan experience, I was invited to a NASCAR car race in Bakersfield, California, where one of the racers put my image and the 3i Atlas on the hood of his car. And he actually invited me to compete in the next race. My wife is objecting to that because of the risk.
Sure.
But it's really interesting that people, everywhere are inspired by the research I'm doing. I'll give you 2 other examples. 2 days from now, we will have an unveiling event of 51 watercolors and 2 bronze sculptures that were donated to my office. Amazing. By the most accomplished sculptor from New York City, Greg Wyatt, who was inspired by my research. I also got a message from a manager of a singer in the UK that is coming out with a single, Aliens Are Real. His name is Swan, and they wanted a blurb from me that would accompany the release of that single. There are so many people out there that write emails to me that they are really inspired by the work, and that they believe that in fact we are not alone and that we should invest in this research, and they find the scientific inquiry uplifting. So I'm fully convinced that I should maintain course and pursue it.
I couldn't agree more. And if I were a songwriter, I would write a song called Neil deGrasse Tyson should go talk to his therapist about his jealousy issues with Dr. Avi Loeb. Well, Dr. Loeb, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure. And I don't have kids, but if I did, I would want them to grow up to be like you. I think I just can't say enough about how inspirational I think you are, especially to our young people. You're a gift. That's I'll leave it at that. But thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much. I still feel that I'm the kid I used to be, and I see science as the privilege of maintaining our childhood curiosity. So let's all be kids, and rather than pretend that we are the adults in the room, because that would allow us to gain new knowledge and realize, that we might have siblings more accomplished than we are, and they might teach us things and inspire us to do better. That's an opportunity for us to grow as a civilization and be more intelligent, by exploring space rather than focusing on conflicts on this rock that we were born on.
Folks, if you enjoyed our show, you will love this episode. Thank you for tuning in, and if you love our channel, please hit that subscribe button. See you next time.